So you missed just a couple of shows and everybody bails on you. And welcome to Hacking Business Technology. Your one and only host today, Matt Hooper. My other co-hosts have bailed on me because I've been bailing on them for the past few weeks. So this week, we're going to talk about digital performance. Last episode, we talked about digital strategy. Well, Mark and Matt did. And you know, it's funny when I hear Mark Kawasaki speak about digital, it's so emotional and it's so real to him. And, you know, he's like so much older than I am too. So that's the paradox there for such an old guy. He's so in tune with what drives people from a human limitation to a digital limitation. And it's striking to me that digital is not just about IT and about information. And when Mark was talking, he was talking about the need for digital, the need to go digital, the need for the electronic components and the information pieced together. But he used a term a couple times, about being relevant in the digital age. And so that got me thinking, this week, let's talk about performance of digital. Because to have a digital strategy is one thing. To achieve milestones of a project in replacing some manual process that requires you to print out a paper and get a form to now having it available on a tablet is certainly one measure of your performance to go digital. You could carve out in your business, right, the vital business functions that operate your organization. And you could say, I want X percent by the end of 2016 to be completely digital, completely paper-free. To remove the physical limitations, whether it be geolocation, whether it be access and information. So there's a mobile strategy component to it. There's an accessibility component to it. There may be an integrated single sign-on availability to it so that the access to that information and knowing who you are and what you want to do and do you have the rights to do that all come together as part of your digital strategy. But for these number of vital business functions, say it's 75% of the key things that run our operations, we want to be digital. Does that really equate to your being relevant? Does that really equate to you having a relevant digital strategy? So it begs the question for IT professionals, how do we measure ourselves? How do we measure ourselves in a digital performance way? And as I often do, I went right back to the service desk. Here is the question, how many times, for instance, did we have to take a phone call, right? Because a phone call is a physical interaction. It may use VoIP, right? So the actual communication may be technically digital, but I don't think that counts. I think that's kind of cheating. So let's just assume that we're on the same page here, and that's a physical interaction between human and human. The very sheer fact that they had to pick up a phone or enter keys or touch keys to get a hold of someone in support, and then relate back to them the issues and challenges that they're facing or the error message that they're facing. And the support person then has to type it in and translate, what does that error code mean, or what's it look like? And they go and search. That's a physical limitation, right? So from a digital performance standpoint, I would say, even though you may be doing first call resolution, and you may have knowledge that you can search and that analyst can solve the problem, we're still failing in our digital strategy. So for instance, why didn't the application recognize the error message? Why didn't the application know that an error just popped up and automatically go search the knowledge base or open an incident ticket and come back to the end user saying, well, that's not what we wanted? It makes me think of the fail whale, I think was that Twitter when it used to get overcapacity on its performance, so it would have the fail whale. So, something's gone wrong. We don't know what happened, right? You know what happened. You ran out of bandwidth capacity or computing capacity. So that's a good example of performance in a digital space from a support standpoint, right? If we can eliminate those constraint points of someone actually having to call or log or wait or self-healing systems, those are good performance points. But then how do you drive that behavior? Because obviously we have to detect that fault. Obviously we have to understand it. And it got me thinking about gamification. And you've heard me speak on podcasts for many years. Have always been a big fan of gamification. I got a chance to watch a sales engineer do a demo on gamification, and it started to click to me that we all like recognition. We all like to be rewarded, and sometimes when we turn to metrics and reporting, it's not fast enough, or it's not real enough to why I'm doing it. Very specifically, let's talk about knowledge creation. Getting people to write down how to fix something, the steps they took. I think so many times of how easy it would be for me to just create a video on doing certain procedures and sharing that with everybody, instead of me having to take the phone call over and over again on how to do X, Y, Z. But yet I never do that. I think about it. It was not real enough to me. It's not real time enough to me because the calls come in over a couple times a month. And every time it comes in, I say, I should have put that video together and shared it with everybody. And I could say, hey, well, thanks for calling, but I got a video here. You can go watch that. So you think of knowledge creation. And what are the metrics I used to run when I would analyze our first tier's effectiveness? If I really wanted to know, was first call resolution working for my organization when I managed IT operations, particularly the service desk, what was my first call resolution numbers? Were they going up? That's a clear and evident metric that you're increasing first call resolution rate, right? But then I would quantify that and qualify it with a couple of things. Quantitatively, I wanted to know, was I having an increase in call wait time in association to my first call resolution going up? In other words, if the wrong person was on the phone, from an analyst perspective, answering the call, and they didn't get it off to the next person, well, then they were taking longer on the call. And they weren't reducing the call time. They were making somebody wait longer. And then once they get them on the phone, they were keeping them on longer because they wanted to have first call resolution rate. We would sometimes run that report and say, hey, Matt's done 25% more first call resolution rate. Let's reward him with that. Give him a prize, take him out to dinner, whatever. So you reward and you recognize a action, but was it justifiable and was it the right action? Because if you increased your call time, well, now you're making people wait on the call longer. And if you're not escalating to the right people fast enough who could actually get the resolution done, well, then you're actually causing that business person, whether it would be it could be a doctor at a hospital, it could be a lawyer in a law firm, it could be a banker, a mortgage underwriter in a financial services company, someone who's actually going to get back to doing the business is on the phone longer, right? Waiting on the queue longer, now waiting with you longer. So we would look at call time. We'd also look at number of first call resolution rates that had associated knowledge to it. Because as analysts, we can't support everything, especially in larger environments. There's way too many applications, could be hundreds, if not thousands of applications that people could be calling about. So for us to triage and understand, we need knowledge that's created. So the first call resolution rate, if we're troubleshooting and we don't have the knowledge and we don't have the remedial steps that we could take, or we don't have insights to what's recently changed, if we don't have transparency into who's on call and we can get the right information real time, we're not really providing a good experience. So call time in the queue, number of knowledge articles associated to that incident, and then of course satisfaction surveys. If we did an employee satisfaction survey or call time satisfaction survey back to that end user who called in, or if it was to an external customer satisfaction survey, looking at those metrics in association with that to say, well, yeah, we resolved it the first tier, but were they happy? They may have wanted to talk to 2 or 3 other people and got their situation resolved sooner and maybe with higher quality had they escalated. So while first call resolution rate is a good operational metric, particularly within my experience when I was part of an MSP, something we really wanted to drive because every escalation was more costly to us. Those were higher cost individuals at tier 2 and tier 3. But was it really driving the metric we wanted to? And by the time we got to the end of the month, what was that telling us? Did we even know that was the performance we were looking for? So in the service management space, self-service, knowledge, correlation of information, correlated and integrated processes, systems of record that we can query, all contribute to our digital strategy. It gives us the right information at the right time with less physical barriers of interaction. We have those barriers, we take the steps to do that. So here's what gamification kind of triggered in my head. What gamification does is if I associate or create a knowledge article based on an incident or experience that I had, it may raise my point value. I might go from junior analyst or newbie or some kind of beginner type symbol, and whatever your gamification rules and pictorial views of that is, next to my name and my profile. All of a sudden I can start looking at the leaderboard and I can say, oh, well, what is this person doing? And if you put gamification in the right way, such as creating knowledge or escalating based on lack of knowledge in an appropriate way, we're getting away from the metrics that we think matter to us from an operational perspective and get more into that user experience type metrics. Because now our decisions are more real time, we can look immediately how we're going up that ranking board, how we're increasing our level of support, both from a peer perspective, as well as the transparency back to management. And let's face it, we all like to be leaders on some kind of board. It's fun to play the game. At Fusion last year, me and a fellow from, I think he was Ohio State University, we're going back and forth, beating each other and becoming the leader in the ranking board by tweeting and putting posters and pictures and posting them onto the app. And it was fun. And that's the thing. It creates this kind of team, fun, competitive spirit. And those who are gamed in the right way can actually really start to understand this is why it matters. Creating knowledge or handling the call in the right way or diffusing a situation so it improves the satisfaction and getting real-time satisfaction feedback, and boom, that bumps you up in the board and you created knowledge off of that and you talked about how you handled it, and then someone leveraged that and that bumped them up in the board now too. It creates an atmosphere of understanding that as we take human thinking and human actions and put them into a system that can become learned from our actions and understand what we've done and where the problem areas are or what technology is lagging. And if you look at that and you reach that now outside of the service desk, take that to the development teams who identified certain number of bugs and didn't allow them to be released into production, and they get ranked changes without incident, get higher ranks for those teams. Less reduction of calls from users not understanding the interface because of how well it was designed or how much training was done, or self-service that was promoted through knowledge articles of usage developed by the developers or by the testing team and put out on self-service and used to stop a call coming in or an email coming into the service desk. These are all great factors to rank you up. And then the opposite of that, if you do have a change that has incidents or people have to call in and say, well, the button used to be here and now it's not, how do I apply or submit this transaction? They're calling into the service desk because someone failed to do a user experience training. They failed to update their user guides. They didn't create how-to videos. There was a lack of that transition of that new capability out to the operations. And so thus they failed to perform in a digital way. And when we do that, we hate developers. When we do that, we hate architects who fail to think about the digital experience. And ultimately, that has an impact on that end user who's just trying to get their job done. They want to move faster. It's why they're adopting the technology. They want to get away from paper and pens and manual processes and meetings and phone calls and all the things that physical limitations cause constraints for. And they want to use their tablet. And they want to go out and they want to now on the fly get the information they need and not have to spend as much time in preparation and preparing and planning and more time execution. Because if they can execute faster, it makes the organization more competitive. Right? It's how we come to the term that we are now an agile organization, is that we can, with data and insights, maneuver to avoid risk-based situations or capitalize on gains, whether it be profitability by bringing your product to market, a new sale, better transparency into our competitive analysis, whatever the business situation. The digital performance affects the organizational performance and thus affects the business performance. That's why we say sometimes companies have become IT companies that do financial services, or IT companies that are now providing banking services. There's new mortgage companies and loan companies like Sophie.com that don't even offer retail brick and mortar branches anymore. Everything's online. We have organizations like Netflix, right, that have put Blockbuster out of business because they just become so focused on their digital strategy and digital performance. And so it's interesting to me how, as we talk about our digital strategies, just how it will change the measurement of our performance, the measurement of our human interaction with digital. So long story short, I guess I'm kind of becoming a fan of gamification. I think maybe there is a space in this world for it. I kind of sort of felt that way from a basic first tier analyst standpoint. I got one over a little bit there, but the rest of IT, like I couldn't imagine myself as a network engineer embracing gamification. But now I could. If I got points for registering my network changes into the service management system, for either recording the change or putting it through the approval board based on risk factors, if I was registering my CIs appropriately, or if there was an audit and verification, if I got extra points because of how accurate it was. Hello, Farrar, saving me from my monologuing.
Hey, sorry. You know how Friday fires go.
I do. Well, so I was talking about, based on Barron's and Mark's episode last week about digital strategy, is digital performance. And it was like a light bulb went off in my head about how gamification can actually start to change how we measure digital performance. So previously, my strategy was look at your vital business functions and determine how many of those vital business functions you want to be paperless, to be remove the physical manual processes, to eliminate the coordination between humans that had to exist in order to make decisions. Those are kind of key performance indicators for me about how we're doing digitally. But now it seems like gamification could change things. So for instance, how I purchase new assets, and do they get registered into the CMDB and in my asset repository? And am I checking back the contract against SLAs? Those could give me more points as a network engineer, for instance, which could never have cared before about gamification. But now all of a sudden it's showing that, hey, I'm a responsible professional. You know?
I like that, and I think that takes away the often negative connotation around going through the process of first thinking about what you have to automate and then having to follow a process. And classic case just this week amongst our clients where I literally felt like I had gone back to the 80s and 90s or something when someone's like, well, it takes me longer to fill in a change request than it does to put in this app change. I was like, oh my God, we're still doing this. So
Yeah.
I love that. And imagine where if you're in your service management system, as you're doing that, you get a little ding, ding, badge, point. I think that would be kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a great point. It takes me back to a time when I remember a particular engineer who was one of my peers was getting all kinds of accolades for how fast he was getting things done. And he was they kept saying, oh, he's so customer focused, always there and responding to the customer's needs. And I was saying to myself, yeah, but this is the Yahoo who doesn't write anything down. He had zero documentation. He never tested his stuff. So 9 times out of 10, when someone called a complaint, it was because of something he created. So, you know, what was an observed opinion was that, hey, this person's fast, responsive, and Hooper, you know, you're slow, you're too process focused. I was like, yeah, but my stuff works, and I deliver it with quality. And there wasn't an appreciation for all the sustainability that I was building into my engineering platform and environment. Now, ultimately, over time, it got to the point where this was recognized, and I was promoted and moved on to other areas of the organization where instability and the lack of integrity of the systems was causing real business impact, and I got put in charge of that stuff to clean it up. But yeah, it's that kind of stuff. Like, why log the change? It takes me 15 minutes to make the fix, and it takes me 30 minutes to get it in the system and approved, which that's a whole different situation, and we need to fix that too. But
I think I was tweeting some frustration about that last week as well. But that's But you know, and it's challenging because there's all of these competing objectives, right? How do we improve our time to market? How do we sustain quality? You know, finding that balance is still such a challenge, right? And I still am a firm believer that we can achieve that if we focus on efficiencies with our process, right? And finding those opportunities to lean them out, still cover our basis, right? But then put in the right metrics, incentives, and things in place for people who get rewarded for least amount of incidents as a result of my change, right? Like, you know how they have like the days without incident meter at some like field sites?
yes,
How cool would it be to say days without changes that resulted in incident? You know, and that becomes a metric that everyone crowds around and says, let's like, you know, contribute to that. I think it'd be very cool.
yes. Was the Phoenix Project or somebody? There was somebody talking about that from a manufacturing perspective. How it goes to TQM and Lean Six, right? About the reduction of defects and things like that. But the whole sign of you know the celebration of that we didn't have incidents, we didn't drive a forklift into somebody or take out a rack, right? This idea that's really gamification, isn't it? That someone get rewarded and how they were measured, right? We're trying to change behavior based on immediate performance analysis.
Absolutely. And again, another balance point, right? You know, they always say, oh, you know, we talk about rewarding that hero culture, that hero mentality, but I think we also, through gamification, can reward the other side of the coin, which is on preventing those fires. So
yeah, and it's tough too, because, and we've heard a lot of talk about hero mentality, and I struggle with that a little bit because, as you have been and I have been in our careers, we've been that hero, we've been that go-to person, and at that point in my time, I honestly can't say I had a greater satisfaction in my career than when I was a hero, because I always knew immediately what priority I had to work on. Yeah. I always had that P1 fire right in front of my face. It made trying to figure out what was I supposed to do a whole lot easier, and you can really get complacent in that role. And at the same time, we, you know, as an organization, didn't have the financial means or the appetite to be systemically sustainable. You know, we were a just-in-time manufacturing company in this particular part of my career, where IT was still the people in the back room you would slid pizza and warm Coke under the door to. So, you know, we didn't have a lot of respect and a lot of understanding, but certainly the recognition for our failure against business impact was evident. So,
Right.
Sometimes coming in and trying to say, hey, if we had, I remember our systems kept overheating, and I put a plan together of a raised floor with HVAC with this ventilation system that would suck the air through the racks appropriately, as opposed to buying all new equipment with the new heating control systems in it. And it got shot down, and they ended up putting these big honking AC units and blowers in the data center, and you had to wear earplugs to go in there and do maintenance on a system. So then I sucked that up, and I put a justification in for remote control tools, so we didn't have to go into the data center. we got the lights out. Yeah, IP-based lights out boards.
Skill for all of our users. That's the lesson here. Persevere.
Persevere. Just, fight your battles. But it is hard because you were valued as a hero, but not appreciated. And that's a weird place to be.
No, I totally get you. Totally. It's there's just a few things that we still struggle with, and I feel like there are some very small wins that we can put into place, but you have to have that support. We have to know what it means to appreciate, right? And there's something that goes beyond the here you go, thanks, and coming out, and it's a challenge.
Yeah. And I think when the gamification kind of kicks in, and you recognize that, hey, here's the things to do to make you more valuable to us as an organization. They're optional. You don't have to put knowledge against an incident. We really want you to, but if you don't, your recognition is going to be lower. But if you do, if you took some time and really thought about crafting that article or whatever.
So not only does it have to come from leadership, but I think there has to be a leadership mentality change. People still, when I talk about gamification, or even forget gamification, a fun or different way to do something other than what they're used to, there's resistance there. They're like, there's a hesitancy, especially in some of the larger corporations that are more used to that that traditional professional, approach. And it's really hard. It's a roadblock for a lot of people because they don't necessarily perceive it as something that can deliver so much positive results, right?
Yeah.
We are very, even learning as a parent, right? Of my now almost 1-year-old toddler, which is just mind blowing how quickly they grow, but that's a whole other topic. But very similarly, right? And it's so easy for me to say no, but it's not as easy for me to explain to her, no, you shouldn't do that because, even starting at such a young age, or reward her for something, instead of just rewarding her for doing something right, making her learn that that's a part of her duty as a person, And I was reading a fantastic blog post about, rather than forcing someone to say please and thank you, make it a part of your natural language when you're talking as a parent, to say to your other spouse, please, can you pass something? And naturally then your kids will learn those manners. And I think the same thing goes for organizations. Instead of forcing policy down the throat or forcing the process down your throat, to your point, to say, hey, we value, right, this because, and it should start from the top down. We're going to, put out knowledge. We're going to do certain things and emulate the behavior that we want the rest of our organization to emulate. So.
Yeah, that's fantastic. You have to lead by example. You really have to start there. It reminds me frequently of myself that if I don't have my to-do list clearly planned, and my priorities clearly planned, when they ask other people what their priorities are, I can see that they're not in line with mine because mine aren't clearly articulated. And your cultural norm that you're talking about is so important. Just wait till she's 15. I think that's why we get exhausted, because at 15, the person is now mature enough that they could understand the whys, but they're just not getting the big picture of it. They're getting little slices. And so not only do you have to explain the big picture, but then figure out where their learned knowledge is and where their gaps are. Yeah. And it's just exhausting. You just want to ship them away.
There you go. There you have it, folks. Parenting and hacking business technology all in one.
That's right. That's right. That's how you hack business technology. But it is culture, right? It is culture to get people to make the change. And what Matt and Mark were talking about last week, the strategy is great, but it's the adoption and it's the relevancy of that strategy.
Absolutely.
It's so hard, and we're in many organizations just not fast enough that this new digitally native generation is coming in, and now you've got this full dichotomy of some who just don't want to embrace it, and others who are saying, "Dude, seriously, when are you going to step this thing up?" And it's a tough time.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Well, thank you for jumping on. Thank you all for watching this week's episode, and we'll catch you next week.
Next week, same time, same place. Have a great weekend.
Bye, everybody.